Hello again, I'm Jim Deken for the St. Joseph Evangelization Network, and we're coming to you live from the 74th Annual Serra International Convention in St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. And I'm sure you can hear in the background the buzz of excitement that pervades the convention space as people are learning and being inspired by the presenters and the exhibitors and each other at this convention. We've been talking with a number of the folks who are here for the convention. We're very pleased to have with us right now Father Chris Martin from the Archdiocese of St. Louis. Father Martin, welcome to St. Joseph.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
And you are the Vocation Director for the Archdiocese.
I am.
And you also serve as the Vice Rector of Kenrick Glennon Seminary, yes?
That's correct. So just this year, the Archbishop asked me to take over the college seminary.
And that's those two full-time jobs you got going on there, yes?
I have a lot of help, and so nobody does anything alone in the church, and so I have a great assistant vocation director in Father Brian Fallon, and there's obviously a wonderful, great staff and faculty at the seminary as well.
And it's fortunate, I suppose, and probably no accident, that those two jobs are so highly interrelated.
That's right. So I've been teasing people that I recruited a lot of these guys. Now I just have to live with them. So it's just kind of going to be a different experience.
So it's a kind of an incentive to do the vocation job a little better, is it?
Yeah. It's gone from let's give this guy a chance to I don't know if I want to live with this guy. No, I'm kidding. I mean, it's going to be wonderful. It'll be good for me, and I hope it'll be a blessing for the men too, as we just try to help them fall in love with the Lord and help them fall in love with the church and really have a positive discernment experience if God's calling them to the ministerial priesthood or not.
As a vocation director, you're kind of in a unique position to look at the state of vocations or the response to vocations in an archdiocese like St. Louis. How do you see that?
Well, I think that, again, nationally speaking, even internationally speaking, as a diocese, I think we're doing well comparatively. However, like all other dioceses in the world, nationally, internationally, we can do better. And so the phrase that we've been using a lot is a culture of vocations. And what I think we mean by that is that the Lord very often just kind of speaks in the whisper of the heart. And so we're trying to give parishes, families, pastors, youth ministers, campus ministers, whatever resources we can, whatever training we can, whatever assistance we can, just to try to create an environment where young men and women are able to hear the gentle whisper. And we live in such a noisy society, social media-driven society, where I think the average American spends 6 hours a day looking at their phone. And so it's very difficult for us to try to engage the culture. We have to use the tools of culture to tell the young people to withdraw from culture a little bit and to listen. And so it's kind of a catch-22.
I was going to say, you seem to be at cross purposes there.
Right. So we have to use the tools that they have in front of them all the time to tell them that they don't need to use the tools they have in front of them all the time.
Oh, that's a tricky one.
Yeah. And right now I'm doing a little bit of study through the Catholic University of America, and one of the papers that I'm writing on is about how we have a real narcissistic society that young people are growing up in today. That from the time that they were little babies, they were wearing outfits that says, I'm a diva, I'm a princess, and everything else. And we live in this really self-promotion mode of seeking fame rather than holiness. And so what we need to try to do is, again, try to address young people growing up in this culture about how authentic happiness and true fulfillment isn't found in anything you can buy, anything you can consume, and that as great as YouTube or Facebook might be, that those 5 minutes of fame are so fleeting that they won't fulfill you, and that the deepest yearnings of the heart are something that only God can fulfill. And so it's a huge challenge. It's an exciting challenge. It's an exciting time to be in vocation work. It's an exciting time to be a Serran, the vocation arm of the church, to try to promote on the diocesan level, at the parish level, this call to create this culture that's really countercultural,
right,
in the eyes of the Western world, especially right now, to know that and to believe that the Lord is calling many young men and many young women to a vocation to the ministerial priesthood or to the consecrated life. And it's just a matter of giving them the amount of support that they need to first hear the call and then respond.
Now, this whole mindset of it's all about me,
Right.
is probably one of the great obstacles that young people face in their efforts to respond to the call if it comes.
It can be, because obviously the Lord tells us, you must deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And there can even be sometimes a temptation in the midst of ministry or in the midst of a vocation to sometimes make it a little bit about yourself. And so it's a continual call to conversion that we have, and to realize, again, that the Lord lifts up those who humble themselves. And so as the Lord emptied himself, we're called to, in discernment, give the Lord our all, and in emptying ourselves, he then gives us so much more than we could ever hope, ask, or imagine in return.
So what are some of the other obstacles that get in the way of people responding well to the call?
Sure, I think that besides just the culture in general, unfortunately, lots of times it can be the family dynamic that young men and women are growing up in. I think with smaller families, that we have a lot of investment, quote unquote, in ideology. So what I mean by that is mom and dad have specific plans or visions for their sons and daughters that they expect them to kind of fulfill for them. Could be something as simple as a different profession, sometimes it's grandchildren carrying on the family name. And so sometimes when a young man or woman says that they feel like God is calling them to a religious vocation, mom and dad can be a real obstacle to that, because they say, well, no, you have to try to fulfill our vision, our plan for life. And so it's not uncommon, again, when I'm working with young men in the vocation office, that I'd say maybe a little less than half of the time, mom and dad can be one of the obstacles that we really kind of have to try to address with them.
And that can be tough.
It's very tough, again, because out of genuine love, and I'm not throwing stones at mom and dad out there, because what I think we have to realize is that they genuinely want their son and daughter to be happy, but when you're not called to a particular vocation, it's tough to imagine being happy in that vocation. And so mom and dad are worried about loneliness. They're worried about maybe like the current reputation of the priesthood in the church, or whatever it would be, and in their own hearts, they're concerned that they wouldn't be happy doing it, so they don't know if their son or daughter would be happy responding to a religious call. And I sometimes, tongue-in-cheek, tease married couples. I said, well, if you think that you're advertising unbridled bliss 24/7,
Yeah.
you're not.
What kind of an advertisement are you for your vocation?
Right. That every vocation has great joys and crosses that we're called to bear. And it's really just a matter of, is the Lord calling? Because we don't want to have a young man get ordained that's not being called to the priesthood. That wouldn't serve God, it wouldn't serve the church, and it wouldn't help the man in any way, And so as a vocation director, and as we try to build up this culture of vocations, it truly is not a matter of trying to persuade anybody to do anything. It's about responding to the call that's already there.
Now, because you wear both hats, the vocation director and the vice rector of the seminary, you're seeing things from two sides, as you mentioned earlier. And is it fair to say that these obstacles and these challenges don't go away the minute you walk in the door of the seminary?
Oh, absolutely. That it's called a house of formation for a reason. And really, you go all the way back to the relationship that Jesus had with the 12, and he walked with them for 3 years. And I'm sure there's lots of hidden things. Even in, St. John says at the end of his gospel, there are many other things the Lord said and did that aren't written in this book. If they were written down, all the books of the world couldn't contain them.
Right.
And so you don't come into the seminary because God is calling you to the priesthood. You come because he's calling you to discern the priesthood. You don't come to the seminary because you're already formed to be a priest. You come to the seminary to be formed. And so
it's a lot more than just getting your ticket punched, is that what you're saying?
It is, and it's a journey. And what I try to tell young people, and I try to tell, families, is that the Lord has already been journeying with you, that the Lord has already been forming you into the saint that he's calling you to become. And so that journey and this part of seminary formation aren't disjointed from one another. It's just a call, is the Lord calling you to continue this journey now in the seminary in a formal formation process?
Okay. Now, when we think of vocation directors,
Mm-hmm.
at least some people do, we think typically of vocations to the priesthood.
Correct.
But your office gets involved with vocations to the consecrated life, to the diaconate at all?
So it really varies diocese by diocese. So we're blessed here that my primary focus is diocesan priesthood. We have 85 religious communities in the Archdiocese
Wow.
of St. Louis.
Okay.
And so all of them also have their own director of vocations. And so my office tries to guide young men or women that might be discerning religious life towards the community that they seem that they're attracted to. Or if the communities have like an event they want us to promote, we promote that as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have our own office of the diaconate as well. That's just an office dedicated to them. And then people say, well, what about the vocation to marriage as well? And I say, well, we actually have an office of marriage and family life, you know, and so we're abundantly blessed in this archdiocese. I will meet as the vocation director. Sometimes I guess you could call me the discernment director because somebody says, I don't know what God's calling me to. And I'll meet with that young man or woman and I'll say, well, here's kind of how we begin discernment well. Like it's rooted in scripture, it's rooted in prayer. Find a good spiritual director and then come back and tell me what you're experiencing in that moment, and then we know what path to kind of start walking down.
How long does this discernment process take? Is there any normal?
Well, what I would say is that one of maybe the other obstacles is that discernment isn't supposed to be perpetual, right? And so we're not
Eventually you have to make up your mind. Is that what you're
exactly.
saying?
You know, that what we have sometimes in our society is also a fear of commitment.
Mhm.
Because we have so many other options that are open to us, we're afraid if I say yes to one thing, I'm going to miss out on something better. Whereas in years and centuries gone by, you didn't necessarily have all those options in front of you that young people have now. Right. And so a fear of commitment sometimes can keep a young man or woman from taking the first step. What I would say is typically, if a young man or woman comes to me and they say that I'm really feeling in prayer the Lord's calling me, that I would say in 2 years or less, usually like give them a year to kind of solidify that, maybe another year to get their house in order, and then it's time to make a formal step in some way, or else they're going to be perpetually discerning, and I would hate for a young man or woman to wake up 10, 15 years from now and say, I should have gone and seen, you know. So.
All right. Any final thoughts? Any recommendations or advice you would give to lay people who want to help with the promotion of vocations?
You know, sometimes, you know, let the Lord use you as an instrument. So if you think you see something in a young man or woman, it should be a compliment, I would think, to say, have you ever considered the priesthood? Have you ever considered the religious life? It's sometimes just the simple invitation can be the beginning of the person really responding to the Lord. So I think that whatever we can do to kind of make discernment a normal part of our Catholic existence again, that every young man should think about the priesthood, every young woman should think about religious life, just as we would say it's crazy if a guy comes to me and says, I've never thought about getting married, or a young woman said, I never thought of getting married. You'd say, well, that's kind of odd.
Where have you been? That's going to do it for this edition of the St. Joseph Evangelization Network coverage of the Serra International Convention in St. Louis.